working with someone that doesn't come in as a trained musician, like, I read a couple books on music psychology, and like, you got to look at things for what they are. Like, there's four real ways like the human brain perceives any sound that we hear, and it's the pitch of it, the rhythm of it, the dynamics, how quiet or how loud something is, and the length, like the sound envelope of it. So it's, if you factor in, like when I'm working with an artist who doesn't really have the vision for what they want musically, I have to kind of actively look for what their strengths are. So like one of the things was that, typically, like there's no explanation for why, but people typically lean more towards rhythm or pitch, or like having a stronger sense of pitch naturally, but it's more rare that they have both, right? So like I'll try to find what a certain person gravitates to naturally.
Welcome to the Music Combine for this week. Got a really special guest that Greg brought in today. If you don't know about the mighty Talfayan over there in the Dirty Jers, he literally is really connected in the North Jersey music scene. And today's guest is probably one of the crown jewels of that. Zaki Ali comes to us from Closter, New Jersey, which I first lived in Harrington Park when I grew up, and then moved to Saddle River. Mm-hmm. And literally, guy's doing some great things. He's building a new studio. It's 2020. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He also possesses the qualities that we always talk about: doing things right, doing things with etiquette. And without further ado, as the French would say, please welcome Zaki Ali.
Hey, Zach. Yo. I'll just add to that criteria. He is the owner at Redshift Recording Studios, which will be migrating to the studio he's at right now. So he's building out the studio, as Mike mentioned earlier. He is the guitarist at Callius. It's an instrumental metal band, and they're pretty nasty. He's the drummer at The Silencer, so he's a multi-instrumentalist, and drummer at Ali XX, which is his own solo stuff, and drummer of Aetherius, which is an instrumental band as well, and worked at Sleepless Empire as well, which is another band. So he's doing all these different projects, bands, and he generally records all these bands as well. So he's not only playing in the bands, he's actually the engineer and producing them as well. So how did I meet Zaki? I met him when he was in a band called Darkness Descends. We rehearsed at Streets. He was just getting into drums at the time. He didn't, he loved drums. He was just learning. I guess, how old were you, Zach, at that time?
It was a while back. I mean, I think I was 19. 19. When I met you.
Yeah.
And you were actually filling in for Darkness Descends.
Right. And I didn't want to.
They were just looking for a drummer, and my friend said I knew how to play
you didn't want. Okay, so dive into that story. You didn't want to.
Well, they're good friends. Dean's in it.
Okay.
This was before Dean was in it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, they're good friends of mine, and they needed a drummer. They were down the hall. I already knew their songs because I played with them a bunch of times. And Zach was going to be possibly drumming for them, and he didn't know yet, and he was asking me some questions, and they didn't know if Zach was going to be the drummer either, because Zach was just learning how to play drums, which is amazing because Zach, what are you, 32 now?
30.
So in that 10-year span, 11-year span, he has learned how to play drums like nobody's business. And I'm talking about doing things on the double kick that I can't even do, which is doubles. So he's doing like What are those 30-second notes? But they're not 30-second notes. They're more than that, right?
I mean, it depends on the context of the song, I guess. Like, but yeah, doubles just essentially doing rudiments like you do with your hands, but on the double bass, and it allows you to do different combinations of different patterns that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it definitely benefits in that sound.
So my fastest is his, like, it's too easy for him to do. But I mean, I do it more with like a swivel foot. He does doubles, but it makes it so much faster, and you could just super speed. So his musical acumen from when he was younger, he started with the cello, and then he transitioned to playing guitar, and he started. That's where his main instrument started. So let's go through that. Like I met you then, you took over at Darkness Descends, and then you started making music with those guys, and you guys started, moving up in the scene. You were playing with ICP. You had some good.
Really? That's one of my favorite bands, by the way. I love it.
We were invited to the gathering. It was pretty incredible, actually.
The meeting of the Juggalos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because my sister's not an ICP fan at all.
Oh my god! I mean,
but we've watched that documentary, and it's like it looks like the most insane shit in the world.
It doesn't matter if you're an ICP fan or not. Like, there's no experience like going to that in the world. Like, I couldn't compare it to anything. Like it's really its own thing. And I came back to regular society after, and I was just like, what is this?
Regular society.
Maybe we'll get lucky and that'll be 2021 moving forward.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Like you started, like I said, you started when you were a young guy, right?
Yeah.
You were playing guitar and learning theory and everything like that, right? And then.
Well, not so much. So actually, so like you said, my first instrument was actually cello in third grade. But it was also like I was kind of just doing it for like a school band thing. It wasn't like my passion,
Right.
And but growing up, like my father had all these like classic LPs and vinyl records, like original prints from like Pink Floyd and
oh wow,
I mean all these like this whole collection of records and stuff. And he would listen to them every once in a while. And there's something about the sound of electric guitar that really appealed to me. Always, and like I just never really had a chance to like mess with an electric guitar, pick it up until I was 13 or so, and I'd moved to Closter. I used to live in Edison before that.
Okay.
So actually I met my friend Chris, who you just met, down the street. He had a drum kit, and he was like, you should get a guitar, we should start playing some music. And it was different, the idea fascinated me, whatever. I saved up, got this guitar, this Washburn. It was like $100, but it was the first time I really had the opportunity to kind of make these electric guitar sounds that I liked, growing up. And I thought it was so cool. It just fascinated me, and I got so into it. And I mean, we started one band back then in middle school. And, everyone had their differences or whatever, and that fell apart. And then I was in another band. I was in two other bands after that, and then I couldn't rely on people anymore because people were just not, there was too much drama and not enough work getting done.
Right.
So that after that, there was a while where I was just like, all right, forget this. I'm not working with people anymore. I got a drum machine, and I started programming drums. Mm-hmm. And I think that was like the first, I'm talking about when I was 14 now. So like, this was the first time where I had really started to understand where certain aspects of the drum kit should be placed on the beat and how a drummer would play things. You know what I mean? I was actively trying to do that to get my drums to sound more realistic,
Right.
And
that's always like the crook of things, man, especially like with a computer. It's like,
oh yeah.
There's very few guys I've seen in the studio, and I've worked with a ton of like pretty amazing producers, and there's only one guy I've known who can actually sit there with a keyboard and play it like it's a drum kit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so important, and it's really cool that you said on a keyboard, because that is the universal language behind the drum kit. And eventually, when I did get the keyboard, I had learned to start playing drums on the keyboard too. Like, you have to know that C is the kick drum, and that exactly, like ease your snare drum, all of that, and then you can realistically kind of play it, but not only by playing it, you're adding almost like the human feel to it. The other thing is guys always like they'll program their cymbals, and cymbals are the hardest to replicate and make sound real. So just the way the dynamics are controlled, all the cymbals and all that. But I had never in a million years thought that I would be getting behind the drum kit to ever play any of that stuff, because naturally I had started leaning towards programming stuff with just ridiculous double bass on it, and I was like, I'm never going to find anyone to play this, so I might as well just program it and see what happens.
And then learn it afterwards.
Yeah. And then, so there was like years, I wrote albums worth of material with this drum machine. I still have all these songs.
What drum machine was it?
It was the Boss DR880.
Oh, yeah.
The classic. Yeah, it was definitely an incredible unit. I mean, they had all the pre-programmed fills in there. And I learned a lot from it,
it's the best canned drum machine at the time.
It
was either that or like when I first started. So going back to 92, 93, you either had like the D4 drum brain and you could put triggers on your kit, or you had the Alesis HR16 was like the gold standard.
Yeah.
Back then. Not old, huh? They've been around since the 90s.
Yeah. Dude, like in high school,
there was a bunch
I craved
of
a quadro reverb for my guitar rig. Craved a quadro.
Nice.
Quadro reverb was like the shit.
Hell yeah.
What were you saying, Zach? You're saying...
Sorry, Zach.
No problem. Yeah, I was saying, like, at the time there was a decent amount of options as far as drum machines went, but I was really looking for something that portrayed the real drum kit sound, and I think the DR880 was like the one at the time.
Nice.
So.
And then essentially you started learning how to play drums, and then
Well, yeah. So it was funny because I was playing in this one band, it broke up, whatever, and then I was like writing my own stuff, and I was still friends with all these guys, and they really got into like jam bands and like Fish and Disco Biscuits and Humphreys, and
Humphreys is awesome.
Yeah,
it was such a new like territory to me. Like after listening to like Dream Theater and Planet X and Virgil Donati and guys like that, and I'm like, what is this? Like I went to a couple shows, I checked it out. These guys got into the habit of just getting in the room and jamming for hours, like improvising and seeing. And I think that was a huge part of like building my musicianship too, is like trying to see what you can come up with on the spot and see like how you can compliment other people on the spot, like.
Yeah. Go for it. Sorry.
Well, yeah, no. I was going to say a lot of people don't realize the importance of the art of improvisation, you know what I mean? But as far as I've seen, like the best musicians I've come across in the world, as of more recently, like it's almost like they've connected the bridge between improvisation and composition, where when they improvise, it's almost as if it's already been composed, but they're just thinking that far ahead.
I think it's also, you look at it as like a bag of tricks, and I think also too, you made a really good point before you got cut off, was how fresh it makes it. I'm paraphrasing, but how fresh it makes it. I was recently watching the Joe Bonamassa movie Guitar Man.
Yeah.
And Kevin Shirley, his producer, who's produced like Rush and Iron Maiden and all these groups, he literally says like he'll not, they'll be like, well, what key? Joe will ask him like, what key am I in? He'll literally not tell him so that he reacts.
Oh yeah.
Performs better, and that's like, to me, do you find like when working with your current clientele as far as artists and bands and stuff like that, are you challenging them to move towards that direction, or is it more of you? It
depends on the artist.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with that. It comes down to how composed what they're coming in with is. And a lot of it's kind of, feeding off of their energy and seeing how to most efficiently get their vision out of them, So it's almost like being a psychologist in a way. Like,
oh yeah, bartender, hairdresser, audio engineer. It's all
exactly.
All the same.
You've got to read where they're coming from and what their vision is at the end of the day, and then make it show.
And the thing is about it is, just from, that's basically one of the most crucial things I found in my experience, and you can relate, is that when you're in a room with 2 or 3 other people and you're just noodling around, there's a discipline to take what you're doing that you may not know what it's going to be, but you're able to structure it in such a way because you've been doing it for so long that when you jump on it and improv it, that it literally unfolds itself. It literally unfolds. The whole song will unfold in front of you. The discipline I find that's hard is not just me, but people I jam with too, is keeping that one thing going and not jumping to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People they make things that shouldn't be so complex. You know what I mean? It's simple. If I'm doing like an arpeggiatic riff, there's rhythms in there that
of course
played. Like we jammed the other day. Like you were doing something, and I started doing it with you, and then we started fucking unfolding something. But we were playing. But because we both know structure and composition, we could have literally finished that out that night if we focused a little bit more time on that.
100%.
So it's cool because then you take that know-how as a producer and an engineer, and you're working with, let's just say, Enzo right now, right?
Yeah.
And how we had to write his song for him, that his idea, he's coming from a lyrical standpoint, which is different, right? We're usually coming from the music end of it, but he's coming from the rap end of it. He's doing lyrics and he's spitting, and we had to adjust the composition to his the way his rhyme scheme was, right?
Yeah.
Of it, and you did that so well, and he's not a trained vocalist.
Well, so here's the thing, like, when you're working with someone that doesn't come in as a trained musician, like, I read a couple books on music psychology, and like, you got to look at things for what they are. Like, there's 4 real ways like the human brain perceives any sound that we hear, and it's the pitch of it, the rhythm of it, the dynamics, how quiet or how loud something is, and the length, like the sound envelope of it. So it's, if you factor in, like when I'm working with an artist who doesn't really have the vision for what they want musically, I have to kind of actively look for what their strengths are. So like one of the things was that, typically, like there's no explanation for why, but people typically lean more towards rhythm or pitch, or like having a stronger sense of pitch naturally, but it's more rare that they have both, right? So like I'll try to find what a certain person gravitates to naturally. In Enzo's case, it would be rhythm. Like he's got great rhythm. And you have to kind of use that to its advantage to work and build on the song. It's kind of just taking what they have already and like building up on it from the ground up.
And you're reverse engineering it in a way too, because like generally as a musician, you're starting from the rhythmic standpoint. Like, okay, so if you play a lick on the guitar, I'm going to find those main root notes in there, and I'm going to start making a rhythm out of that. That's a rhythm that's going on within that arpeggiatic riff that you're creating, if that's the case. And the bass guitar, when the bass player gets on the bass, all he has to do is match the root notes of what you're playing on your guitar, and then just match my bass drum. And then all of a sudden we have a nice little skeleton there, right? Yeah. And, with Enzo, he's a WWE wrestler, former, and Zach is working with him and writing his music for him. And the way he's working with him is kind of reverse engineered, as I said. And he's listening to his ideas, and then he's just building the music around that. And then we're adjusting that composition around his vocals, which generally it's working out to be pretty natural, I think, right? With the vocals of...
Yeah, I think it's a good balance of like we were talking about, the improvisation and composition, where we kind of improvise a little bit to see the sounds that he likes, and then we compose around that. So we're like kind of throwing out ideas, and he's like, okay, I like that. And then it's like, okay, we got this idea. Now let's structure around it. Let's build up. Let's add some bass. Let's add some keyboards, guitars, and so forth. And then before you know it, it's a song,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's been a lot of that. You kind of just have to like weigh out your options and see like how you have to approach working with different artists. So
Different artists.
it really comes down to the person you're working with, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of dive into this really quick. So as a musician, you're a musician learning these instruments, applying them, and then you start recording yourself, and you get into recording, and then you go to school. Where'd you go to school? Tell everybody.
I went to Hofstra.
Hofstra. Okay.
Oh, nice. They have a recording program?
No, they don't. So,
What'd you take in Hofstra? Music.
so initially, I actually started off as a civil engineer, completely random.
Yeah.
But I was really into architecture, and even, I mean, I know that's not civil engineering, but the engineering, the design aspect of things, that's just been me. Like growing up, I like to understand how things work.
Sure.
I'm like really, you know, I guess I have like a big passion for like physics and stuff too.
Funny enough, that deals with audio.
Well, yeah. Worlds kind of merged eventually, but I went to Hofstra for civil engineering, and then eventually ended up switching to music merchandising. And I didn't actually finish there, but while I was still at Hofstra, I made sure that I took all my core music classes, like ear training, 3 semesters of ear training. There's music theory, there's music counterpoint, and classical piano. I took jazz guitar, jazz drums, and that's when I really started to get serious with it. So, you know, funny enough that I ended up meeting Greg, and Greg put in a good word for me to join this band, because it was the perfect timing where I kind of took this new knowledge I was learning and had a real setting to apply it to actively. And had I not practiced it the way I did because of that, I definitely wouldn't be here right now. I probably wouldn't even be recording right now. It's crazy.
It's funny how that works. Like,
I mean, maybe I'd be recording. I started recording on a digital recorder when I was 14, right after I got that drum machine.
what, like a VS 880 or something like that?
VR or something.
What's that?
Like a VS 880?
It was a Zoom MRS 1608. It was a 16-track digital recorder.
Oh yeah,
That thing was
I remember
awesome.
them.
We did our Mike. I worked with him when I was 17. That's when I got like serious, when I started working with Mike, and he put me on the Metrodome. But we did our pre-production.
Thank God.
Tascam 4-track. And
Yeah, nice.
we did it, and it was like, you had to take it was the whole take. There was no punching in.
Yeah.
So
No messing up. I think that's a huge part of it too. Like when I started off, that conditioned me so much as a musician, because I was like 14, 15, 16, writing all these songs, and I would do full takes front to back with the click track. And I got used to the click, and then, just nailing these takes front to back and trying to get them perfect. So it definitely made me a better musician.
And you still do that to this day. When we were tracking some of my stuff, you're like, dude, just do the full take. We're gonna get this. Do it again.
Well, yeah, but it's a little bit different. See, again, it comes down to the artist I'm working with. So if I know that the composition is like well performed for the most part, I can take a full take and edit in the chords that need to be replaced, or any string noise or anything. But yeah, like if they don't have the song down and they don't really know what they want, then we definitely take it slower and section by section, build up on it.
And that's another thing is, and we talk about this a lot too, is like pre-production, how important that is before you go into the studio. As an engineer, you can make more money that way, but I mean, I don't think it's the most efficient way. I think you should know what you're doing before you go in, because it also helps you too. You don't want to sit there and have to handhold everybody on everything.
I don't mind doing it. It's not even about like a money thing, or like, I'm going to get this many hours out of this client at all. It's more of like the writing style of the artist, because it's like capturing, some people write through capturing that improvisation, while others will have their stuff composed, and like yourself. And that's awesome, because then you have so much more of a backbone to work off of. Yeah. And you get more time to really focus on the production, or like, not more time to focus, but like you can, more easily get into the mixing aspects of it.
Yeah. I mean, also too, you don't do pre-production. I mean, from my experience from working on like platinum selling records to, even smaller bands, the thing is like, it's like building a house without blueprints. I mean,
exactly.
Literally. Like, I mean, there's songwriting sessions in pop music where you basically go in and you knock out a song in a day.
Yeah.
I've seen that aspect of it. But if you're going in with a band, I mean, you don't have pre-production.
Yeah.
We talked about it with another guest of ours, where it's like, if you can't get the structure, can't get what you're settled on or whatever. I mean, back in the day when I worked with Greg, you know, you had to go to a facility to do drums. I didn't have one at the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I could do all the other stuff at home. But the thing is like, if we didn't have that blueprint, it's just screwing around. You know?
Yeah, and if you're a professional, you know, generally, like if me and you went to a studio right now to make up something, I know for a fact, based on all the experience we have, we can knock out a song very easily and actually lay it down and like we did the other day, like last week.
Yeah.
We know with 3 chords we're going to keep it the same, and the dynamics are going to change. The distribution of what I'm playing is going to change on whatever.
Yeah, it's just about setting up a backbone for you to be able to track to. And funny enough, it's like completely different now. We restructured everything, and it's just like a different song now. But we have all the sources to work with, so
exactly. And let's talk about, you know, that and you know, actually in addition to is Callius, that band, the talent in that band is just ridiculous. You know, you're playing guitar in that. You recorded the album as well. You have a lead. The girl's Nicole,
yeah,
nasty. She's endorsed by Jackson, right?
Yeah, she's with Jackson, EVH. She
all the Fender brand companies.
Yeah. She's in with Fender. And she, well, yeah, I guess she used to be with a different guitar company. She has DiMarzio pickups, and I don't know all our sponsors off the top of my head, but yeah, she's basically connected in the music industry with a lot of you know, major companies, and it was pretty awesome. I kind of went out to NAMM one year, and I'd worked with the drummer JP.
Yep, JP Need, right?
Yeah, Andrade.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he really is an incredible drummer. I mean, you know, like, it was funny enough. So like years before Callius even started, it was like the first song. There's a song on our record, Fos, that I actually wrote in 2014. So like, to put into perspective, like how long I've kind of just been sitting on this material. My idea behind some of it, I mean, you know, obviously the record isn't all me. You know, there's 2 of the songs were like, you know, full band collaborative effort on that record. So like, you know, I had all these ideas as I was playing in Darkness Descends. I was still playing guitar. I didn't stop playing guitar, but I was learning so much more about rhythms and drums that it was changing the way I was thinking behind the guitar, you know? So and it was kind of like the same process, like back in the day where I would program out drums and write this, but now I wanted to play real drums on it and, you know, see what I could do with that. So, and also while challenging myself rhythmically, like on the guitar. So I would write out these things. A lot of them turned into like Darkness Descends breakdowns, actually. So,
by the way, you took Darkness Descends as like your, no offense to them, the guys are great, they were dedicated and everything, but you took them from a very generic metal band to like a really, really like high caliber, talented band that like had polyrhythmic breakdowns and like just amazing patterns just throughout the whole songs. Like, I couldn't believe.
Yeah, thanks, man. We all put in a lot of work, man.
I know you did, and it came out great. And
yeah,
shame that didn't keep going, but it also lent itself to what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there was a lot of I can't even off the top of my head name how many bands I've been in since then, but what that turned into, you know, like, because I was playing in Darkness. I think we were on full time for like 3-4 years. You know, we played The Gathering, we played Bamboozle, we were doing these big festivals. We had our own festival, Darkness Fest at Dingbat, which was wildly successful. People still ask me about that to this day.
I played that.
You probably did one year. We did that for 5 years.
Huh.
So I mean, I don't know, there must have been 60, 70 bands over those 5 years that have played that.
Wow.
Or more than that even. The second year there was 22 bands. I mean, over 2 days, but after having put in so much work with these guys and, writing the stuff and the growth of the band, really, I had built up all these connections in the scene, and everyone was kind of busy with their own things for a little while. Dean was involved with a couple other bands too, and so I started another project with a really talented guitar player. This band called Oraculum. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
That I have not, but that's an awesome name.
Oh man, well, yeah, it just means the oracle in Latin. It's still probably to this day one of the craziest records I'm on, hands down. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it's been out. Unfortunately, I've never said this in public or to anyone, no one knows about this except for my close friends, but I worked on this record with this guitar player for 2 years, and the day it came out, his whole attitude towards me, perspective on everything just changed, and, he decided to just take everything and change all the passwords to everything, and
wow.
It was what it was.
Funny how jealousy works.
Yeah, and those were that EP was the 4 songs that band ever put out, and people loved it. That band would have been something.
That guy ruined it. The guitar player ruined it.
100%. He went through 3 or 4 different lineups after the fact, and they couldn't play the songs. And people would just leave because, it was just not
worth their time.
Yeah. It turned into a mess. But it's funny enough because one of the lineups, after that Oraculum thing happened and fell apart, Julian was actually the other guitar player, was the guy we got for rhythm guitar initially. So once the whole thing fell apart, we were like, all right, let's start our own band. And that's where Sleepless Empire originated.
Nasty band. Project.
Yeah. So, and it's funny enough because, Julian is another unbelievable guitar player. He's not limited by odd rhythms. He's not limited by any lead you have to play. He just plays things that aren't humanly natural, for physically, to do. So, we had, written a bunch of stuff, and it kind of just stayed as a studio thing for a while, and he put out a record that was initially under his name, and that whole thing happened, and eventually we kind of took a break for a while, and until very recently actually, and that break at that moment was so discouraging to me because I had put in all this work with Darkness, I put in all this work with Oraculum, and now Sleepless Empire, and now everything is just it's what are we doing? You know what I mean? What's next? So
that's very defeating. I can only imagine.
It was to the point. I was Chuck from Darkness. He had gone through all this stuff after the whole Oraculum thing happened. He moved out to Colorado. He was like, I'm done with music. I'm sure he still picks up his bass and stuff, but it was really discouraging. And I think it takes going through things like that to really take it to the next level, because after is when I really started focusing on my drum videos and stuff. After Sleepless Empire, I started doing all these covers, and I started setting a new standard for myself as far as recording drums, where I would just pick a cover. It could be a technical metal cover, like a Faceless song or something.
Yeah, or Fear Factory.
Fear Factory, right? That was another one. But I would just look up popular metal songs and or pop songs or anything really. And my idea was to play the song once, listen to it all the way through, and really try to absorb the structure of it. Then my kit would already be mic'd up. I would get on the kit, set up the cameras, and just hit record and go 3 times through. And I wanted to have every hit I needed in the cover down by the 3rd take. So it was almost challenging myself, not as an engineer to move quickly, but to learn how to learn faster.
Yeah. Right.
And by doing that, I think that was a major change in my musicianship too, because it allowed me to look at things so much more compositionally, just writing wise and everything. And, you know, in the midst of all this happening, I started writing some stuff, some of which is on the Guitarist record now. And, you know, like it, I was writing these songs and programming, or like playing real drums, real guitar, bass, keyboard. And I never thought that I would have a real band to play these songs. That was never my intention even, you know, like I just didn't think it was possible, because a lot of them were culminations of riffs that I'd played with other bands that the guys just couldn't pick up on. They just couldn't get it. Like, people couldn't grasp it. So I would just play it. I was like, all right, I got to just document this somehow.
Yeah.
And eventually, so through doing these YouTube videos, I started hosting these drum sheds, and I would get in touch with all the best drummers I'd met through the scene, and, you know, like the top drummers in the areas. Most of these guys were like Berkeley graduates and like
forgot one.
Ridiculous drummers, like the best in the tri-state area. And
I watched the videos. They're nasty, dude. Yeah,
I mean, no one around here can play like those guys. But they, you know, we would get in a room and just shed for 8 bars. It was, again, bringing back this whole aspect of improvisation. Shed, you know, 8 bars, one drummer would solo while the others held back. Then the next drummer would shed 8 bars and solo. Just improvised chops, you know. And it's so interesting to see the different approaches to like such advanced drummers, because they've gone down completely different paths.
Yep.
To, you know, be able to play the way they play. And it was cool to see how one drummer would influence the next, then the next, and the next. And it was really interesting. I did that very, very often for a long time. And JP was one of the drummers in that.
He was.
So in doing that with JP, we did a couple covers together where I just played 8-string, and I showed him some of the songs, and he was like, I love this. I went to NAMM, not the last year, the year before.
Yeah.
And
I was there that year.
JP had actually tracked on an Allegiant record. So Nicole was connected to Allegiant somehow.
Wasn't the Soilwork singer?
What's that?
Isn't it Legion with the Soilwork singer and the guys from Mutiny Within?
I don't know.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
I'm not sure.
Allegiant has these records, though, that they do these huge cover records. So they covered all of like Rush's counterparts.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like, there's those records out there. I don't get what Allegiant is. I don't know if they have original songs, but all I've ever heard from those guys is like their whole
of like the I didn't know they had any covers.
Yeah, neither did I. I might be a different Legion. Like, I'm thinking of Legion, not a Legion.
Oh, Allegiant.
Allegiant. Allegeon. Eon. Yeah, it's but JP was a drummer on the first record for Allegiant, and I guess Nicole was connected to him. She was looking for a drummer, and one of the Allegiant guys connected her to JP, and she was looking for another 8-string player. Just by chance. I don't know why I chose to write on 8 strings. I just love the extended range and being able to go that extra low note. I also feel like it lends itself to the production aspect, to compose for the production, not just...
Let me ask you a question about that real quick.
Yeah.
I've never mixed a record with 8 strings, but I listen to a lot of Animals as Leaders. I listen to a lot of bands that do that type of prog metal stuff. Do you find, I mean, obviously Animals is AAL's the most blatant example of a band with no bass player, 2 guitar players, one's playing bass, or they're playing it simultaneously like a piano.
That's what they do.
Essentially. Are you finding, and I've heard this from some like pretty big engineers who mix some pretty big records, is it getting to the point now where when you record bands like that are down in like A negative, G minor, like whatever fucking below find, you know, is it becoming harder to mix as far as like low end frequency and keeping it contained on a record? Because that's
absolutely. But that was the biggest challenge for me. Like, really understanding how to make it work and sound cohesive, like coherent, I guess. It's definitely a challenge because the approach to mixing stuff like that is very different. Whereas in our case with Kalias, most of the bass parts are in the same range as the guitar parts.
Right.
And so it's not so much about, you're taking up the same frequency range, but it's about distinguishing the character of the tones you have. So you actually, it comes down to kind of blending the bass and guitar tone into one almost. So like you have a lot of saturation on the bass, and you take out a lot of lows from the guitar and kind of let the bass handle it and kind of glue it all together. And I think that's the sound of that is almost like what lends itself to be unique from a production standpoint. So a lot of the writing on that record, was like written to sound well on record, I guess, or portray like a different sound, really. But it is definitely a challenge, and I think a big trick is just keeping the characteristics of every instrument, like all the important characteristics, but still having everything heard in the mix. And because it could get muddy real quick in the low mid range and the lows. And in some cases, like with a lot of bands I'll work with, they'll come into a heavy section, like even with 6 strings, and run octavers on things, and kind of you get this like sound to it. And you could try to do it on 8 string, but it kind of turns into more of like a rumble, like almost feels like you're sitting in an earthquake.
Sure. No, most definitely. Because like if you look at like, and I feel like a lot of, I don't understand Steph Carpenter and that whole 9-string thing, but I look at that and automatically my brain goes to, well, this is what an engineer would do. And I look at that and I go, well, if you're in C sharp, tuned to C sharp or B or whatever, and you're down that low, or A, whatever you're using out of the normal tuning, it really, I just think of like, well, where's the separation?
Yeah.
Like, because like if you listen to a lot of those records, like the one I can think of the most commonly is the last AAL record, not to use that as the gross example, but you listen to Madness of Many, and there's not a low end on it. It's a lot of it's rolled out so you can hear the definition of what they're playing.
Yeah. I think with that record, they definitely got more technical. The musicianship is just unbelievable on that record. I think a lot of it has to do with how it was mixed too, because personally, I like the mix on Joy of Motion a little better.
Sure.
I think it's more unique, like it's definitely more, in my opinion, more like cutting edge and groundbreaking. But yeah, like when it comes down to thinking about how you want to portray an 8-string when there's bass involved and stuff, a lot of times I'm kind of just looking at it as a 6-string. Yeah. So like the bottom 6 strings will just be, when I'm thinking of the leads and stuff, any rhythm part I'm playing is kind of more focused on blending with the bass to create a single sound. Kind of like, like Meshuggah, like.
Yeah. Well, they play 8 strings, 9 strings?
8 strings, right. But if you listen to like any of their newer live footage, they put out some great live videos recently, where the way that bass tone blends with the guitar it's crazy sounding. It's not so own thing, like
I saw them probably one of the last dates of the Violent Sleep a Reason tour.
Oh man, that was
one of the last 2 or 3 that they did it around a NAMM show. So like they played in LA. I saw the one in LA at Wiltern. It was my first time ever seeing them. And
oh my god, life-changing.
I did 100% life-changing.
Yeah.
And I can see what you're saying. Like, yes, the blend. And I think also the bass is almost there just to anchor it down so that they can do all the other shit that they do.
Well, it's so funny because like you would think that so much of the low end you're hearing and mixes like that is coming from the guitar, but there's almost no low end on the guitar at all. It's all the bass, that's what keeps it tight like that.
And I saw them at Irving Plaza, I think around the same time, and they didn't even have a bass player. There was just 2 guitar players.
Damn.
No bass player. And it still sounded fucking amazing. I was wondering how they were getting that sound, but I was like, oh, they have 8 strings, so I guess they're, either they're playing it through the PA and they're playing it anyway, or they're just...
I think an interesting thing, even with animals, is like if you listen to, anything, Of Joy of Motion, Mind of Madness of
Many.
Yeah. There's certain parts where the 8 string is essentially playing the role of bass. And I wouldn't be surprised, or I don't doubt for a second that there were points in those recording sessions where they picked up a bass to actually just hold it down. You can totally hear it, like on certain parts where they're just walking a bass line, or I don't know. It comes down to like also like the difference between bass and guitar and how you approach using the low strings on an 8 string, because you can't just riff and go really fast on it. It's kind of like you want to utilize the low range to like bring out the characteristics of the chords you're playing.
Sure.
And I think that's really the beauty of it. You can get these amazing chord voicings and you have a 6-octave range. It's like a piano, but it's a guitar. So
right. I'm gonna kind of shift gears, but it's totally irrelevant too. I mean, you've been recording bands and artists for years now, and this is what you do for a living. So, value that we have to our listenership and future listenership is going beyond just being the musician, and having the other aspects involved of learning how to record yourself and working with a group of people that really harness your best out of you. So it's like you already said it, like you've already went through the journey of what made you start recording yourself and how it got you better. Yeah. But, maybe you could dive into the aspect of like not ever having to get an actual job and just being able to do, recording, even though, you may have you may live with your parents, you may use their basement, but you make it into a recording studio and make it a legitimate business. And, any parent should help their kids do that. I think that's a great thing. But you literally took the ball and ran with it. You haven't stopped. So what's kind of the mindset of that, of you doing that and being able to just not have to,
Well, it's funny how life kind of works out, I guess. So I was initially, when I was playing in Darkness, I was teaching a lot. I had a lot of students. Maybe not like a lot, but I was teaching privately. And
guitar?
What's that? Guitar and drums. Mostly drums, because everyone knew me as a drummer. I was just, I had a bunch of private students, maybe like 14, 15 private students, but to keep that up privately and driving to their lessons and stuff, it was a thing. It was becoming very like, it was definitely exhausting and, whatever. But I felt like, I could be doing more useful stuff with my time. And so I was, I had taken a couple courses in recording and had started learning the basics of Pro Tools and had a little bit of knowledge over the years just from doing it. And I wanted to start getting into that more. A lot of the reason for that was also because the first full-length record I did was with Darkness. Mm-hmm. And we had no idea what we were doing when we went in. We wasted so much money.
I mean, Dean was recording you at some point, right? Before you even recorded.
Well, he had the computer. We kind of self-recorded. That was probably like some of the first sessions I ever ran, period, on a computer, What's that?
That album sounds great though, man.
Oh, well, what we did at that time, it wasn't good.
That's out right now?
Oh, well, what's out right now is a lot better. That is not what that was, though. But
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we did some work on Dean's computer, a lot of experimenting and coming to the harsh realization that we can't make it sound that good. And then we ended up going to this huge studio, sounded awesome. Or didn't sound awesome. The barbershop. And
Yeah,
it's like a $10 million studio, live rooms in a church. This place. This place is incredible. Like, they have all the equipment you could ever want.
They have an SSL in there, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, they have SSL. They have preamps from Electric Ladyland, original preamps.
They're like, $10,000 microphones, like every single.
Do they have like the ones that are pulled out of the Focusrite console, Electric Lady?
I don't know.
No, they had compressors and a couple preamps from Electric Lady. I used
to do sessions at Electric Lady, so like nice. I'm interested in what they pilfered out of there.
I think it just had a couple, like some compressors from there, like from that were on. Yeah,
that was like I recorded in the room that was Jimmy's room A.
Nice.
I can tell you that is like the greatest. That's where the Weezer's Blue album was done. That's where Corrosion and Conformity did. Did Deliverance. That room.
Yeah. You can feel the energy in the air.
Oh God, dude! Like
100%. That's how I feel when I walk into this room, and it's amazing.
Nice, dude. Yeah. So I think it comes down to this. This was something my journey. Recording was always a bitch to get the justification you deserved because it was about the money and about where you're going. And
100%. That became such a thing to me that like I never wanted to like waste that much money on recording again. And so I made it like a passion and like just told myself I'm going to figure this out. I had these sounds that I wanted to accomplish in my head, but I couldn't translate with this low end that you were talking about. And I started just working on it, doing research and, took more classes and bought a couple of master classes, got my own Pro Tools setup computer. I was working at the time too. And, I got sick at one point. I got appendicitis and I had surgery for it. And when I got out of that, I was off of work for like a month. And I decided that was the pivotal moment that I was going to back off of that and focus on doing my thing and like really perfecting my craft and getting better at it. Mm-hmm. And now, like 5-6 years later, after having worked with so many different bands, it's like I can't even begin to describe the amount of breakthroughs and things I've learned and, just taking my knowledge from engineering and physics and applying that to the analog equipment and understanding the circuitry and, really in-depth, like just figuring out exactly how the ins and outs of everything I was using worked and stuff. So,
yeah. And I watch you, I work with you and you're at, just even with drum editing specifically, like how really good you are. And, just, you already know, like having the theory behind you is always a help, but like, how to quantize shit without making it fake. Right. So you take things and you make you're really good at taking the natural takes and making them the best they could be. And I think that's a really desired skill, especially for myself and other drummers out there. Just, when you record, you're worried about not getting everything down, but like when you're able to get a couple good takes, like, and then you're able to just take the best of those and then make it work like that. I think it's just the experience of trial and error, and you get sick of going to recording studios and having to depend on other people and holding them accountable. And then, it's exhausting. So you said that before Chuck just gave up. I mean, there's I know many of my friends who are great musicians that literally just gave up because they were sick of being in bands and sick of going through that process of not only one, putting all their hard work and energy into something and putting it out there and not getting anything in return. And two was just the recording in general, just like having to waste your money and like not getting out of it, but not knowing better because you didn't take the initiative to really learn it on your own.
I think also too, just from my experience
what about writing? What's that?
Not from my experience, and this is not a total bash on anybody, but like I know from being in New Jersey and starting my career in the New York City area, it's very hard to do. There's a lot of obstacles that bands I think have to go through in a lot of ways, and navigating that stuff is extremely hard.
Yeah.
And if you can survive it, then I feel like you were meant to do that.
Yeah.
I think when I first moved to LA and I was still doing sessions full time, I didn't have to wake up 2 or 3 hours before to get to a session at 9:00 in Midtown.
Yeah.
I literally woke up an hour before and rolled into the studio 2 miles down the road from my house. It just was so much more scalable. Do you kind of find that now or no?
I find it I find it easier than ever to get good. Like now versus when I was in a band, it's like I could just
I don't even mean just the recordings. I mean, like in general, like if you were playing shows in the city or if you were, you know what I mean? Like it just seems like everything's so spread out.
It is spread out, but nobody's playing shows now. 1, 2.
Yeah.
I think that, this is important. And this is something I always say, like bands have been doing it wrong the whole time. Like now more than ever, you're doing it and that's great, but you're not being efficient. Like there's recording, there's that end of it, there's production, there's songwriting, right? And then there's branding. I think that the thing that's missing is the branding part. And when you're not documenting the process of what you're doing, you're literally doing yourself a disservice because you're going to have to do that anyway. So like there's
missing out on everything you could possibly have. 100%. I mean, but even more to touch on, like, as far as, the whole thing being different, I think the whole world has changed as far as the way recording's done. Like so much recording equipment and gear is like marketed towards home studios and people doing things themselves nowadays, as opposed to before where you had to go to the studio and have this budget for a record. Like people can track their DIs at home with a DI box and their Scarlett interface and send it to me and I can run it through this PV Invective or EVH or Mesa, whatever amp they want.
Do reamping.
Exactly. So, like there's a lot more ways for bands to be cost efficient nowadays, which allows them to have more money set aside for their content and, PR and promoting and stuff. So, I mean, like, I think the whole way bands approach, just doing, their thing is just completely different now.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, it's, I've learned so much on what not to do more than what to do because I haven't stopped. You haven't stopped since since I was 17, I'm 37. It hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
But the thing that has been the most important thing is like, why am I not doing this the way that I know I'm potentially capable of doing? And I learned in the past years of being in a band that it takes holding people accountable to be able to push yourself and get engaged fans. Like there's other ways to get fans now that you don't have to go and put yourself in these terrible positions of and that's really powerful. It's powerful that you can get a really good recording and you could go and put your content out there and you could start paying advertising dollars and putting in front of audiences that are really looking for your type of music, capturing their information and then engaging with those fans and building an audience online. So when you do play a show in a select city, that show is going to be packed. It's going to be packed more than it ever has been with you just doing grassroots marketing. If you can't sell at your own backyard, you shouldn't be fucking going all over the place to fucking play because you're spreading yourself thin, right?
Yeah.
So I've done that to the extent of where I've planned it out where, okay, logistically, I'm going to play Michigan, Chicago, and Indiana.
Yeah.
I'm hopping in a van with another band that I'm going on tour with for that run, and we're sharing equipment, right? That makes sense.
It's really interesting right now because, like, as you're telling me this, like, I could see, I feel like I'm seeing it from both perspectives a little bit, whereas you have a little bit of the old school mindset that I experienced and dealt with Darkness. You know what I mean? Like, putting in the hard work and, like, doing this and that, where I feel like these younger audience and kids, like, they don't understand and they're not trying to do all of that. Like, the world has become lazier.
Yeah.
I think it's not even lazier. I think they just become more entitled. I think 100%. I think there's definitely this, the AYSO soccer mentality where everyone gets a fucking trophy.
Yeah,
exactly.
And at some point that attitude has to change. I've even seen it in, like, my day job is as a financial planner for artists. I've seen it even in the financial industry where it's like everybody wins because you did this, and everything needs to be gamified to keep people engaged. And I feel like that hard work ethic. I mean, like, I know me personally, and I tell this story a lot, like coming into the industry. I mean, I worked with some really big acts when I first started off. I mean, Misfits box set I worked on. I worked with Christina Aguilera. I worked with a lot of different people. And, you know, it was a situation where, you know, for me to get to that point, I had to be, I had to do the hard knocks. I think most kids coming out of audio school now that would go into that, and that it has to be that way.
But there's a reason why people stick.
But there's a reason why. But the thing is to my point, is that, you know, I had coffee poured on me. I tell the story all the time because it's part of the story. I had coffee poured on me, a client, because he didn't want it in a paper cup.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Like, I go back to that old school mentality.
Yeah.
And Mike has a short temper. So it's
not back then. That's what harbored the short temper.
That's where it all started.
Zach, you put in time too as an intern, right? You know, working with and working your way up the ropes there, and sometimes, unfortunately, it lends itself to taking advantage of
majorly
from it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And you were asked to work on some really big records and do drum editing for really, really, really big bands, and you did it, and you didn't get paid for it. And I'm not going to go into it because we don't have to do that, but you still move forward. You don't give up, and you
I mean, it's definitely, you know, all those things are discouraging, you know, like, but at the end of the day, like, someone has to do it, you know, like, and
it's going to be nobody.
Exactly. Like, you know, because it's, I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, you have to know what, I guess, like, you know, what it is that separates you from everyone else, or like what your purpose is really, you know, like,
what's your why, you know, why you do it, right?
Yeah.
And I
was past that point at that, you know, when I edited a record or a few records or whatever. And it wasn't like, you know, to me, I knew I had to do this regardless of whether I was going to be working at a certain studio or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that if that's not my path, and that's not the studio, you know, that's not where my career is going to go down, the path my career is going to go down. Mm-hmm. But, you know, here I am in this brand new studio and building this place out. It's just crazy how life works out. This is going back to the very first question you asked, as far as, you know, what was your plans for 2020 and, you know, what has it turned into?
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to be on a U.S. tour with Allegiant starting in April 9th, and that whole thing got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
It was Allegiant, Fallujah, and Antheos, another band. Antheos is the new band of the old drummer of Animals as Leaders.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we had this awesome tour set up, and everything fell apart. And then I was kind of just stuck home. Clients were scared, you know, reasonably, like for good reason. And I just kind of started, you know, working with my buddy for a little bit as a mechanic. Interesting, like very different. But again, going back to the whole, my interest of learning how things work and figuring out the ins and outs of things. I worked with him for a little while, and, you know, there was a couple remote sessions I was working on and stuff. But then somehow randomly I happened to meet or come across Enzo, who was at his best friend's house that happens to live on my street, you know, like completely random. And he came by. He needed a studio to record in. You know, it was pandemic. Every studio was closed. So I was like, all right, yeah. Why don't you get in the booth? Let's see what we could do. And here I am, and he's my business partner, and we're in this band, and I'm building a studio with him. You know, like, it's just crazy how life works out.
Yeah, it is. It is crazy. And it's I'm pumped to see what happens here on the back end. You know, we're going to be tying in our education, and you know, on the back end of the music, you're one of those people that will be modularized, right? And you'll be able to add value through our mentorship program, which we're going to have separate people. Like we'll have somebody like Mike who he'll focus on whatever he wants to do, and you focus on maybe just drum editing, and like there's tying all this talent together. So for me, this year has been, okay, how can I leverage and distribute all the talent that I know? Like, how do I do that? And I think the podcast was a great startup to that. And where we're going to start going with this is once your studio is done, or not even, you have your studio there, when we're working on modularizing things right now and building out stuff on the back end. And we don't get too much into it on the podcast, but I'm excited about it because that's where it's going. Big there. So what you're doing is pivotal, meaning like you're taking initiative. And I think that's something that you out there as a musician need to understand is if you don't make these actionable steps or take imperfect action, because nothing's ever going to be perfect. You don't have to have the best, most produced video. You just need to make sure that you're documenting something cool that people can see and engage in. And you need to be, trying to record yourself so you can learn and get better at it. But at the same time, you have to go to, and they can make you better, but at least you're learning the process of it and you're getting better. So when you do go record, you'll get it done faster, and that will speed up the process, right? So it's just taking those initiatives. What else can I do today that's going to get me further along down the field, move the ball down the field to that end zone where I can just keep adding more, momentum to my goals. And the goal at the end of the day as a musician is to have really awesome music, making awesome music, documenting that awesome music, having a network of people that you can work with that's going to cultivate and get the best out of you. And at the same time, be able to promote their successes as well as them cross promote your successes. So you have that network. And that's what this music combine really is at the end of the day. So, I mean, I want to kind of wrap it up because we're coming on the hour here. So at the end of the day, I really appreciate you being on the show.
Absolutely.
Talked about it for a long time. It's been a long time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. I'm glad to finally do it.
Yeah, great to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
And Zach and I are doing the Enzo project right now with his band. So you guys will be hearing that as well. But you'll see how that's coming together. And it's not a typical band. Your typical band these days doesn't have to be like that. And I think we've learned that too. It doesn't have to be, we got to grind it out on the road, man, and do that. No. It doesn't have to be like that at all. No. It doesn't have to be like that. It's cool to have that work ethic towards it, but be more efficient. You can use this.
You gotta work smarter, not harder.
Work smarter, not harder, but work at the right things hard so you could work smarter. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing out there. You don't have to be in your typical band, man. You can collaborate with people, and you can get in the studio jam a couple times and have stuff that's already done, and then you can have a couple shows booked and you could start playing out. But at the same time, just work on your music, documenting it, and then getting it out in front of the right people and releasing it correctly instead of just throwing it out there. Right? Yeah. So, that's a huge thing because, again, people just devour content now. They're just going to take your record and they're going to ask for the next one right off the bat. And you're going to be like, fuck, I just spent a year doing this and these guys want the next fucking record. Fuck that. So, that's something that's really I'm going to hammer home all day long to the independent artist, because if you're not the Deftones, if you're not Animals as Leaders, if you're not, Fit for an Autopsy, if you haven't done it yet, the only way you really could get yourself out there and resonate with your own audience is to really do it strategically and just not throw everything out there. I have a friend who's awesome at music and he just puts out new albums and he just throws it out there and nothing happens ever. And it's like, he's really good. Like he plays every instrument.
I feel like there's the spirit and the letter of the law on how to roll out records now. And it's very different than when I first started in the business or what I was traditionally used to in the 80s and late 70s and early 90s.
I mean, at the end of Intake, our first band, it was changing then. The model changed. Like, I mean, El Nino was one of the last bands that got a regular, pretty decent record deal.
Well, I think there were a few others after that. But I mean, as far as like big metal bands, that would probably be one of the last before Nuclear Blast really started taking over.
Mm-hmm. So to that end, it's like, okay, how can I do this and be able to do it and like doing it and still want to do it without feeling defeated, like our counterparts in our experience have done, like who aren't playing anymore because their spirit is broken. It's because they had to go out of their comfort zone so much to find another way, like you did, Zach, which is you like learning the ropes of recording and like taking initiative and like responsibility and being the one at the helm. And now, you have me with you and pushing you to do this other thing that I'm talking about. And it's going to be a real awesome process, and we're going to document it. And you're going to see that it's the best way to go, because, otherwise you're just throwing all your resources out there and you're just spreading yourself too thin. So you want to make the best of everything you got, right? So, if you have a single, don't just fucking put it out there. You got to put, I know we've talked about this and you've done it before and I've done it in the past. I know you want to get it out there, but if you don't have your assets lined up correctly, your content and everything, it's not gonna go anywhere. And and that's what you want. You want to make the best of your time. So
keep the improvising to the music.
Absolutely, brother. So where can they find you, Zach?
You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook.
What's Instagram and Facebook? Zaki Ali.
Yeah, Zaki Ali NJ is Instagram, but I also play in all these different bands. So any of those bands, or I guess through my personal page, you can find all these different bands.
So Zaki, ZAKIAFI.
Yes, NJ.
NJ, and you'll find him out there. He's very handsome, and he's got all his links on his page. Go check it out, because he's a serious force to be reckoned with. It's a pleasure to be, working with him in general, and a pleasure to have
you as well, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Nice to meet you, brother.
So
nice to meet you as well.
I'll talk to you soon, and everybody out there, www.themusiccombine.com. The Music Combine on Instagram, The Music Combine Now on Facebook and YouTube. So, I bid you farewell.
Fun to do.
Adieu. Excellent.
See you, brother.
Yeah. Take care. All right. Awesome. All right, listen, I got to hop on.